I need 4 days for my father's funeral, I said, my voice steadier than the trembling in my chest. Vivian from HR looked up at me over her computer screen. The air conditioning hummed too loudly in the silence that followed. That's not possible right now. You're aware we're in the middle of the Norlin integration. She adjusted her glasses, eyes already drifting back to her monitor. You can take 2 days, maximum. The team needs you here. My father died yesterday. The words felt strange in my mouth, still unreal. The funeral is in Michigan. 2 days isn't enough time to even get there and back. I understand this is difficult, but we're at a critical juncture. Her tone suggested she understood nothing. Perhaps you could attend virtually. Many families are doing that now. I stared at her, waiting for some flicker of humanity. When none came, I said, I need to be there in person. He raised me alone after my mom died. I'm his only family. Vivian sighed, the kind reserved for inconvenient children. Listen, I don't make the rules. We're short-staffed, and your role is essential right now. You'll need to choose between work and family. That's just the reality. Something crystallized inside me in that moment. 3 years of solving every technical emergency, rebuilding systems no one else understood, documenting processes only I could navigate, all reduced to this. I see, I said quietly. That was yesterday. My name is Zara, I'm 32, and until this morning, I was the systems integration specialist at a financial technology firm that handles over $40 million in client assets. My job was solving problems no one else could, connecting disparate systems, creating documentation, and building workflows that kept everything running. Before I go any further, could you please take a few seconds to tell me in the comments where you're watching from? I want to know how far this story reaches. And if you've ever had someone treat your grief like an inconvenience, hit that like button. We need to know we're not alone in these moments. Anyway, when my phone rang 2 days ago with news about my dad, Ellis, I was in the middle of finalizing the database migration that would become central to this story. He'd had a sudden heart attack in his woodworking shop. The neighbor found him. By the time I got the call, he was already gone. Dad had raised me by himself since I was 8, when Mom died from cancer. He taught high school science for 30 years, coached my debate team, and learned to braid hair from YouTube tutorials so I wouldn't feel different from the other girls. When I got my first computer, he sat beside me for hours while I showed him everything I was learning, pretending to understand even when I knew he was lost. You've got a mind like a catalog, he'd tell me. You remember everything. That quality made me invaluable at work. I remembered every client preference, every system quirk, every workaround needed when the expensive software inevitably failed. For 3 years, I'd been the company's memory. It started innocently creating documentation because nobody else would. Spreadsheets tracking client communication preferences, databases of recurring issues and solutions, step-by-step guides for processes only I understood. My boss, Halden, called it Zara's brain, the shared drive where I stored everything. Why pay for expensive knowledge management systems when we have Zara? He'd joke during meetings. Except it wasn't really a joke. They'd declined my requests for proper documentation software twice. So I built my own systems, my own archives. Not for any sinister purpose. I genuinely wanted to solve problems. After Vivian's dismissal of my bereavement request, I walked back to my desk in a fog. Cameron from accounting asked if I was okay. I nodded mechanically. That night in my apartment, I stared at my ceiling, thinking about Dad, about the wooden box he'd made for my childhood treasures that still sat on my bookshelf, about how no one from work would be at his funeral because I barely mentioned my personal life there, about how they couldn't spare me for 4 days to say goodbye to the person who mattered most. At 2 a.m., I opened my laptop. I hadn't planned what happened next. Not really. But as I logged into our company systems remotely, something I did during emergencies, weekends, vacations, a clarity washed over me. For 3 years, I'd created the most comprehensive archive of institutional knowledge imaginable. Client communication histories, undocumented API connections, manual processes that kept millions flowing, password-protected spreadsheets with notes on executive preferences. I'd been the solution to their refusal to invest in proper systems. My fingers moved quickly over the keyboard. I began downloading everything, not company data or client information, but my documentation, my guides, my notes, the maps I'd created of their broken systems. By dawn, I had extracted 3 years of institutional knowledge. I encrypted everything and moved it to my personal cloud storage. Then I systematically removed it all from the company drives, leaving only basic files that anyone would expect to find. My resignation email was simple. Effective immediately. All institutional knowledge I've compiled over 3 years has been relocated to ensure continuity during my personal transition. I included nothing else. No explanation, no 2 weeks' notice, nothing about my father. They hadn't earned that context. Then I shut my laptop, packed a bag, and caught the first flight to Michigan. I turned off my phone during the flight. When I landed and powered it back on, there were 17 missed calls. 9 from Halden, 5 from Vivian, 3 from numbers I didn't recognize. The voicemails escalated in panic. "Zara, call me immediately. We need to discuss your email." Halden, sounding confused. "This is highly unprofessional. Return our calls now." Vivian, cold as ever. "Please call back urgently. The Norland migration is failing and no one can find your documentation." Cameron, stressed. "Whatever you want, we can discuss it. Just call back." Halden again, anxiety creeping in. I didn't call. Instead, I rented a car and drove to my childhood home to begin sorting through Dad's belongings. The small brick house looked exactly as it had during my last visit 3 months ago, except now it felt hollow. My phone kept buzzing. Emails poured in. Text messages multiplied. By evening, I received an email from Halden marked "Urgent Meeting Request," with Vivian and our company's legal counsel copied. They wanted a video call to discuss the situation and your father's funeral arrangements. How interesting that my father's funeral suddenly warranted discussion. I agreed to the call, scheduling it during what would have been my lunch break the next day. Then I silenced my phone again and continued sorting through old photographs of Dad and me. The next morning, I sat at Dad's kitchen table with my laptop open, waiting for their call. When the video connected, I saw Halden, Vivian, and a woman I recognized as Meredith from legal, all crowded around a conference room table. "Zara, thank you for joining," Halden began, his usual confidence noticeably diminished. "First, let me express our condolences about your father." I nodded but said nothing. "We're concerned about your abrupt resignation and the situation with company materials," he continued. "I didn't take any company materials," I replied calmly. "I removed my personal documentation, the systems I built because proper ones were never approved, the workflows I mapped, the guides I wrote on my own initiative. Those were created during company time," Meredith interjected. "Yes, created by me to do my job effectively because the resources I requested were denied. 3 times. I kept my voice even. Nothing I removed contains client data or proprietary information. Just the instruction manuals I wrote." Vivian leaned forward. "The Norland integration is falling apart. The monthly reports are due in 2 days, and the queries you built aren't working. Client communications are in disarray." "That sounds stressful," I said. The silence stretched uncomfortably. "Zara," Halden finally said, "we're prepared to discuss your bereavement leave. 4 days is absolutely reasonable. We can hold your position." "I already resigned," I interrupted. "We're willing to disregard that email given the circumstances," Vivian said quickly. "Grief can cause impulsive decisions." I looked at them through my screen. 3 people who'd never seen me as more than a function, a resource to be optimized. "2 days ago, you told me to choose between work and family," I said, looking directly at Vivian. "I've made my choice." "Please be reasonable," Halden pleaded. "The Norland presentation is tomorrow. We can't access half the systems without your documentation." "That's unfortunate," I replied. "What do you want?" Vivian asked bluntly. "A raise? More vacation time? What will it take to resolve this situation immediately?" I felt a strange calm as I realized they still didn't understand. They thought this was a negotiation tactic. "This isn't about leverage," I told them. "You made it clear where I stood in the company's priorities. I'm simply respecting that clarity by removing myself from the equation. We're prepared to offer you a senior position with a 30% salary increase and flexible work arrangements, Halden said desperately. Just help us through the next 2 weeks. I looked down at the table where a stack of sympathy cards from Dad's former students and colleagues sat. People who valued him. People who understood what mattered. My father's funeral is on Thursday, I said. I'll be busy until next Monday dealing with his estate. After that, I'd be willing to consult at $300 per hour with a minimum engagement of 20 hours per week to help transition my knowledge. My first availability would be next Tuesday. Their faces registered shock at the figure, nearly triple my effective hourly rate. That's extortionate, Vivian sputtered. No, I corrected her. That's the market rate for emergency specialized consulting when organizations find themselves without critical institutional knowledge. You can take it or leave it. This borders on extortion, Meredith warned. I've made no threats. I've taken no company data. I've simply resigned and removed my personal documentation, I said. Check your employment contracts. There's no clause requiring employees to leave behind personal notes or systems they've created to compensate for inadequate resources. I watched them exchange glances, knowing Meredith had already verified this or she wouldn't be negotiating. 10 hours, Halden countered. 10 hours at your consultant rate to get us through the Norlin presentation. 20 hours minimum engagement, payable in advance, I repeated. I'm not interested in negotiating. You decide if the knowledge is worth the cost. Without waiting for a response, I added, I need to go now. The funeral home is waiting for me to select my father's casket. You know how important these family matters are. I disconnected before they could respond. As I sat in Dad's quiet kitchen, surrounded by his life's mementos, something shifted inside me. The hurt remained, but alongside it grew something else, a recognition of my own worth they had never acknowledged. My phone immediately rang again. Halden's number. I let it go to voicemail, then listened. We'll agree to your terms, his voice said tightly. Send your consulting contract and payment details. We need you on a call by 5 p.m. today. I put my phone down and closed my eyes. In the quiet of Dad's house, I could almost hear him saying what he told me when I was hesitating about leaving for college. Sometimes people only understand your value when they feel your absence. I didn't send a contract that afternoon, or that evening. Instead, I visited the funeral home, picked out a simple wooden casket that reminded me of Dad's woodworking, and sat in his workshop running my fingers over his tools. Let me tell you something about grief. It's not linear. It comes in waves, sometimes when you're standing in line at a coffee shop, sometimes when you're holding your father's favorite flannel shirt, breathing in what's left of his scent. That day, it hit me as I found a small wooden pendant he'd been working on with my initials carved into it, an unfinished gift. My phone kept buzzing with increasingly desperate messages. The Norlin presentation is falling apart. Legal is prepared to approve your contract immediately. Please respond ASAP. I silenced them all and continued sorting through Dad's belongings. The funeral was still 2 days away. I had time. On Thursday morning, I stood in the small chapel where both my parents' funerals had now been held. Dad's colleagues filled half the room, science teachers who'd worked alongside him for decades, former students who'd become teachers themselves, neighbors who'd checked on him regularly after I moved away. I recognized every face. As people shared stories about how Ellis had touched their lives, I thought about what creates a meaningful legacy. It isn't the hours worked or deadlines met. It's the humans you help along the way. After the service, my old debate team coach, Ms. Wynne, hugged me tightly. Your father was so proud of you, she said. He told everyone about your work, though I don't think he ever quite understood what you actually did. I laughed through my tears. He tried so hard to get it. He'd ask me to explain that computer thing over and over. That was Ellis, she smiled. He believed in understanding things, even when they didn't come easily to him. As everyone left, I stood alone at his grave, thinking about understanding, how some people try so hard to understand others, while some never bother to try at all. That evening, I finally sent my consulting contract. 4 pages of detailed terms, including a clause specifying all interaction would occur during business hours only, with 24-hour advance scheduling required for any calls or meetings. I also included a knowledge transfer fee of $5,000 in addition to my hourly rate. They signed it within the hour and sent the first payment. The next morning, Friday, I joined a video call with the Norland team. Their presentation had been postponed to Monday, an embarrassing but necessary delay they'd had to request from their potential $3.8 million client. "Thank you for joining us, Zara," Halden said, visible relief in his expression. "We've got the whole team here." The screen showed 12 faces, including several I'd never seen before, likely external consultants they'd panic hired. "I've reviewed what you've prepared so far," I said professionally. "We have significant gaps to address before Monday." For the next 3 hours, I methodically walked them through the missing elements of their presentation. I identified the broken database connections, explained which tables needed to be joined to generate the correct reports, and created a simplified guide for the temporary tech team. Halden kept trying to rush me. "Can we skip ahead to the client portal section? That's most urgent." "Everything is connected," I replied calmly. "If you don't understand the database structure, the portal functions won't make sense. I'm being thorough because that's what you're paying for." By the end of the call, they had enough to cobble together a functional presentation. Not their best work, but enough to avoid complete disaster. "We'll need you on standby Monday during the actual presentation," Vivian said, "not as a request, but as an expectation." "That's not in our agreement," I responded. "Monday I'll be meeting with Dad's attorney to handle his estate. I can schedule 2 hours on Tuesday morning." "But if something goes wrong during the presentation," Halden began. "Then you'll handle it with the information I've provided," I finished for him. That's what the knowledge transfer fee covered. The weekend passed quietly as I continued sorting through Dad's house. Each drawer contained memories, birthday cards I'd made him, scientific journals with his notes in the margins, recipe cards in my mother's handwriting that he'd kept all these years. On Monday, while they were giving their presentation, I met with Dad's attorney. The house was paid off. There was a modest life insurance policy. His pension would end, but he'd left enough for me to take some time to figure out my next steps. "He was always very careful with money," the attorney noted. "Wanted to make sure you'd be taken care of." Unlike some people, I thought. Tuesday morning, I logged on to my final consulting call with the company. Their faces told me everything I needed to know before anyone spoke. "The presentation was challenging," Halden admitted. "We made it through, but there were significant issues with the demonstration portion." "Did you secure the contract?" I asked directly. "Norland has concerns," Vivian said tightly. "They're giving us 2 weeks to address the functionality problems before making their decision." I nodded. "That seems reasonable. What specifically do you need from me today?" For the next 2 hours, I answered their questions with professional detachment. I created additional documentation, explained system connections, and provided clear steps for their new team to follow. As our scheduled time neared its end, Halden cleared his throat. "Zara, we'd like to discuss your return to the company." I raised an eyebrow. "My return?" "Yes," he continued. "We're prepared to offer you a Director of Knowledge Systems position. It would include a team of 3, a 50% salary increase, remote work options, and a seat on the executive committee." I noticed Vivian's tight smile. This hadn't been her idea. "That's quite a change from denying 4 days of bereavement leave," I observed. Vivian shifted uncomfortably. "We've recognized there were institutional failures in how we handled your request." "What's fascinating," I said, leaning closer to my camera, "is that it took a financial threat for that recognition to occur. Not human decency, not company loyalty, not 3 years of solving every problem thrown at me. Just the risk of losing money." "That's not entirely fair," Halden protested weakly. "Isn't it?" I looked at each face on my screen. "For 3 years, I asked for proper knowledge management systems. Denied. I requested additional staff to document our processes. Denied. I built workarounds using my own initiative, and instead of recognizing that as a systemic problem, you called it Zara's brain and considered it solved." No one spoke. Here's what I learned watching my father build relationships with students for 30 years. I continued. People stay where they're valued, not just compensated. They contribute to communities that see them as humans, not functions. I took a breath. I appreciate the offer, but I'll be declining. Our consulting arrangement ends today, as contracted. Please reconsider, Halden said quickly. We can negotiate any terms you want. This isn't about terms, I explained. It's about fundamental values. You showed me yours when it mattered most. I believed you. What about your documentation? Vivian asked, her voice tight. Will you be returning the materials you removed? I smiled slightly. I've provided everything needed for the Norland project as agreed. The rest of my documentation remains my intellectual property, as your legal team has confirmed. Consider it a lesson in valuing institutional knowledge before it walks out the door. Meredith from legal nodded almost imperceptibly. She knew I was right. This is incredibly unprofessional, Vivian snapped, finally breaking. No. I corrected her gently. Unprofessional is telling someone their parents' funeral is an inconvenience. What I'm doing is setting boundaries around my value. There's a difference. As our call time expired, I said my final words to them. I genuinely wish you all well. I hope whoever replaces me receives the support and resources I requested. And I hope the next time someone needs to bury their father, you remember this moment. I disconnected the call. 2 weeks later, I received an email from Cameron in accounting. Norland had declined to sign with the company. The projected $3.8 million deal had fallen through. 3 other clients were reviewing their contracts due to service concerns. I didn't feel the satisfaction I'd expected, just a quiet certainty that actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences are necessary teachers. A month after Dad's funeral, I accepted a position with a smaller tech firm, one whose first question in the interview was about my father, after seeing the gap in my employment. When I explained the circumstances, the CEO nodded and said, "Take all the time you need before starting. Family comes first here. Always." I later learned that Vivian had been reassigned to a non-management role. The company had hired a knowledge management consultant and implemented many of the systems I'd requested years ago. Too late for me, but perhaps not for those who remained. 6 months later, as I settled into my new role, I received a LinkedIn message from Halden. I owe you an apology, not just for how things ended, but for taking your contributions for granted all along. You were right. We didn't value the human, only the function. I'm trying to change that in my new department. The company lost 4 major clients after you left. They're still recovering. I think about your father often, strangely enough. A man I never met who raised someone with such clarity of purpose. He must have been remarkable. I sat with that message for a long time before replying. He was. Thank you for recognizing that. I wish you well, Halden. That night, I placed the wooden pendant my father had been making, the one with my initials, on my desk at home. I'd finished sanding it myself, applied the same oil finish he would have used. It wasn't perfect, but it was complete. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't some elaborate revenge scheme. Sometimes it's simply removing yourself from environments that don't value you, taking your worth with you, and letting the consequences unfold naturally. The company had denied me 4 days to bury my father, and in return, I took something much more valuable, the knowledge they'd never bothered to properly value until it was gone. If you're watching this and you're in a place where your humanity comes second to your productivity, know that you have more power than you realize. Your knowledge, your skills, your presence, these have value beyond what's reflected in your paycheck. Never let anyone convince you otherwise. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth. And if you've ever had to stand up for yourself the way I did, drop a comment below. I want to hear your story too. Because in the end, that's what matters most. Not the work we produce, but the stories we share, the boundaries we defend, and the values we uphold when it matters most. I watched their faces as the presentation concluded. Not a single muscle moved in the conference room. 9 pairs of empty stares. Then Declan, the division director, cleared his throat and exchanged glances with the others before addressing me. Your ideas are interesting, May. The resource optimization plan shows considerable thought. He paused, tapping his pen against the glass tabletop. However, after careful consideration, we've decided to go in a different direction. My heart dropped, even though I'd anticipated these exact words. I see, I replied, gathering my presentation materials while the silence grew oppressive. Look, you're brilliant. No one disputes that, Declan continued, his tone shifting to something falsely sympathetic. But this is the 9th project proposal where we've reached the same conclusion. You simply don't fit our culture here. He didn't even bother lowering his voice. The statement hung between us, as several executives nodded in agreement. Through the glass walls, I noticed staff members pretending not to watch. The culture, I repeated flatly. Yes, we value team players who understand our established approaches. Declan leaned back, already dismissing me. Someone will take over your work immediately. We appreciate your contributions, but perhaps your vision would align better elsewhere. As I gathered my materials, Phoebe from marketing whispered to Terrence, loud enough for me to hear, another May special. All brilliance, zero practicality. Someone snickered. I tucked my tablet under my arm, taking one last look at the presentation I'd spent weekends perfecting. Thank you for the opportunity, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the burning knot in my throat. Walking through the office felt like moving through molasses, each step heavy with the weight of yet another rejection. Behind me, through the still open door, I heard Griffin's voice. Now that's settled. Who's joining for drinks at Ivy's tonight? Laughter erupted as the door swung shut. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. This wasn't just about a project. This was systematic. 3 years, 9 different projects, 9 rejections with the identical excuse. My phone buzzed with a message from my only ally, Lena. How bad? I typed back, same story, different day. The elevator doors opened to reveal Declan's executive assistant, Kennedy. Her eyes widened slightly before she composed herself. Oh, May, I heard what happened. Such a shame. Is it? I asked, stepping inside. Kennedy shifted uncomfortably. Between us, your proposal was brilliant, but you know how things work here. I did, all too well. When the doors opened at the lobby, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of walking out, I pressed the button for the 5th floor, records and analytics. If you've ever been dismissed, overlooked, or told you didn't belong, you know the feeling crawling through my chest right then. If this story resonates with you so far, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Trust me, what happens next is something you won't want to miss. My name is May Tanaka, 32 years old. Systems analyst with specializations in organizational efficiency and project management. I graduated top of my class, speak 4 languages, and have an uncanny ability to identify inefficiencies that others miss. I'm also, apparently, a walking cultural misfit according to the leadership at Palmer Innovations. My first removal came 3 years ago. I developed a resource allocation system that would have eliminated redundancies. Specifically, certain executives' vanity projects that drained company resources. The division head, Griffin, had smiled while explaining I didn't understand the nuances of company culture. The second time was when I suggested promoting talented internal staff instead of hiring expensive outsiders with connections to senior leadership. Terrence had personally shown me the door, explaining that culture fit was as important as competence. By the 6th rejection, I recognized the pattern clearly. Whenever my work threatened their comfortable ecosystem, their lunches, their bonuses, their buddies in middle management, I became culturally incompatible. What broke me wasn't the 7th rejection. It was what I discovered afterward. While clearing my temporary desk, I noticed discrepancies in quarterly performance metrics that others had missed. Year-over-year decline hidden behind creative accounting. Mounting complaints from key clients buried in sanitized reports. The same executives pushing me aside were destroying what had once been an industry leader. That night, I changed my approach. I began quiet conversations with mid-level managers who shared my concerns. Dinners after work, coffee meetings before the day started. We exchanged observations about troubling trends while I cultivated relationships throughout the organization, staying valuable enough to remain employed but never prominent enough to trigger another dismissal. During my 8th rejection, Kennedy had pulled me aside afterward. They're afraid of you, she whispered. Your ideas expose their inadequacies. Now, after this ninth rejection, I stood in the fifth floor records department, facing Tomas, the aging data manager who remembered when the company's founder was still alive. May? What brings you here? He adjusted his glasses, peering at me over ancient computer monitors. I need access to the integrated performance analytics for the last 5 years, I said quietly. The raw data, not the executive summaries. Tomas hesitated. That's restricted information. I know, but I also know you've watched what's happening here longer than anyone. His eyes narrowed slightly. Why do you need it? I took a breath. Because someone needs to show the board what's really happening before it's too late. Tomas studied me for a long moment before turning to his keyboard. I never gave you this, he murmured, typing rapidly. And if anyone asks, you hacked my system. My tablet pinged with an incoming file transfer. Thank you, I said. He didn't look up. Don't thank me yet. What you're about to do will make you enemies. I already have those, I replied. That weekend, as I pored over the data in my apartment, patterns emerged that confirmed my worst suspicions. Client retention down 47%, innovation metrics falling, employee turnover at record highs in every department except executive leadership. My phone rang, startling me from my analysis. Unknown number. Hello? I answered cautiously. Miss Tanaka? An older woman's voice, refined but direct. My name is Eleanor. I believe we need to talk about Palmer Innovations. Who is this? I asked. Someone who shares your concerns. I'd prefer to discuss this in person. Are you available for brunch tomorrow? Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet at an upscale restaurant downtown. I arrived early, scanning the room until I spotted an elegant, silver-haired woman sitting alone by the window. Miss Tanaka, she greeted me, extending her hand. Thank you for coming. How do you know who I am? I asked as I sat down. Eleanor smiled. Because I make it my business to know when someone is trying to save my husband's legacy. My confusion must have shown on my face. My husband founded Palmer Innovations 35 years ago, she clarified. While I'm no longer involved in daily operations, I retain significant voting shares and board influence, and I've been watching you for some time. The waiter arrived with coffee. When he left, Eleanor leaned forward. 9 project removals in 3 years, all with the same excuse about culture, she said. Tell me, Miss Tanaka, what do you think is really happening at Palmer? I hesitated only briefly before pulling out my tablet. I think the current leadership is systematically dismantling everything your husband built, and I can prove it. Eleanor's eyes sparked with interest. Then perhaps it's time we discussed the future, both yours and Palmer's. As I began sharing my findings, neither of us realized we were being watched from across the restaurant by Kennedy, whose loyalty to Declan was about to be tested in ways none of us anticipated. For 2 hours, Eleanor and I dissected the data. Her sharp questions revealed a mind still razor-focused on business, despite her removed position. This quarterly decline pattern began exactly when the current executive team took control, she noted, tracing the downward trend with a manicured fingernail. The board sees sanitized versions of these reports. They're burying the warning signs, I confirmed. As we finished our meeting, Eleanor fixed me with a penetrating gaze. You've risked your position by gathering this information. Why? I considered my answer carefully. Because the company deserves better than leaders who reject innovation to protect their comfort. Her lips curved slightly. My husband would have appreciated that answer. She stood, collecting her purse. Continue your work, Miss Tanaka. I'll be in touch. 3 days later, I was summoned to Declan's office. Kennedy avoided my eyes as I passed her desk. Close the door, Declan ordered when I entered. His typically smooth demeanor had hardened. I understand you had a meeting with Eleanor Palmer on Sunday. My pulse quickened. That's my personal time. Not when you're discussing company business. He leaned forward. Kennedy saw you showing company data to an outsider. Mrs. Palmer is hardly an outsider, I countered. She has no operational role here. His voice lowered dangerously. Where did you get restricted analytics data? I maintained eye contact. I analyzed publicly available information. Don't insult my intelligence. Declan stood, circling his desk. You're suspended pending investigation into data theft. Security will escort you out. My stomach dropped. On what grounds? You've proven my point about culture fit, May. You're not a team player. As security walked me through the office, I noticed Lena watching with wide eyes. Griffin and Terrence huddled by the coffee machine, smirking. At home, I paced my apartment, calculations running through my mind. I'd expected pushback, but not this quickly. Kennedy had reported our meeting immediately. My phone lit up with a text from Lena. "They're searching your workspace. What's happening?" Before I could respond, another message arrived from an unknown number. "Stand firm. E. Eleanor." 2 tense days passed. On the third morning, my phone rang at 6:15 a.m. "Miss Tanaka, this is Victor Nolan, board chairman at Palmer." His deep voice sounded grave. "Your presence is requested at an emergency board meeting this morning, 9 o'clock sharp. I'm currently suspended," I reminded him. "I'm aware. This supersedes that action. The matter is urgent." When I arrived, security escorted me not to the boardroom, but to a small conference room where Eleanor waited with 3 board members I recognized from company photos. "Thank you for coming," Victor said, gesturing toward an empty chair. Eleanor spoke first. "I've called this emergency session to address serious concerns about company direction." She nodded toward me. "Miss, Tanaka has helped compile troubling evidence that current leadership is endangering Palmer's future." For the next hour, I presented my findings to increasingly disturbed board members. Victor's face darkened as I detailed the pattern of rejected innovations that could have reversed declining performance. "Why didn't operations flag these trends?" asked Olivia, the compliance director. "Because operations reports directly to the people concealing the problems," I explained. When I finished, the room fell silent until Victor cleared his throat. "Miss Tanaka, would you step outside while we discuss?" I waited in the hallway, watching employees arrive for the workday, unaware of the earthquake happening in the small conference room. 20 minutes later, Victor opened the door. "We've reached a decision," he said gravely. "Please come with me." He led me to the executive floor and into the CEO's empty office. "Where's Roland?" I asked, referring to the current chief executive. "Board members are speaking with him now," Victor replied, straightening a picture frame on the wall. The situation required immediate action. My confusion must have shown. "Miss Tanaka, the board has unanimously voted to appoint new leadership," he continued. "Someone who understands both our challenges and our potential." I stared at him blankly until his meaning registered. "You can't mean..." "Effective immediately, you are appointed Chief Executive Officer of Palmer Innovations." Victor handed me a folder. "These documents outline the board's decision and your authority." Eleanor was particularly insistent. My mind raced. "The current executive team will report to you now," he finished. "They're being notified as we speak." Through the glass walls, I saw Declan storming down the hallway toward us, face contorted with rage. Behind him trailed Phoebe, Griffin, and the others who had systematically removed me from their projects. "What is the meaning of this?" Declan demanded as he burst into the office. "Victor, you can't be serious. She's under investigation." "An investigation you manufactured," Victor replied calmly. "The board has reviewed Miss Tanaka's evidence and found your leadership wanting." "This is absurd," Phoebe interjected. "She has no executive experience." "Yet she identified problems you either missed or concealed," Victor countered. I stood quietly, watching the realization dawn across their faces as one by one they understood what was happening. Terrence recovered first. "So she charmed the founder's widow. That doesn't qualify her to lead this company." "No," I finally spoke. "My qualifications are 9 rejected projects that would have reversed our decline, and the vision to see what you've been hiding." The tension in the room was electric. Griffin looked ready to explode while Phoebe seemed on the verge of tears. Declan simply stared at me with cold hatred. "The board meeting continues at 11, Victor announced. "Miss Tanaka will address the full executive team then." After they left, I sank into the CEO's chair, trembling slightly from adrenaline. "Breathe," Victor advised. "The hard part begins now." He was right. Within hours, I faced a room full of hostile executives who had spent years dismissing me. Standing at the head of the boardroom table, I felt their resentment like a physical force. "I understand this transition is unexpected," I began. "Unexpected?" Declan interrupted. "It's unprecedented and inappropriate." I met his gaze steadily, as was suspending an employee for speaking with a board member. Before he could respond, I distributed folders to everyone present. These contain restructuring plans for each division. "You have 2 options. Commit to our renewed values of innovation and accountability, or accept the departure terms on page 4. The room erupted in protests until I raised my hand. "You've made it abundantly clear that I don't fit your culture." I continued once they quieted. "Now you must decide if you can adapt to mine." Griffin slammed his folder shut. "This is nothing but revenge." No, I corrected him. This is recovery of Palmer's founding principles and market position. I outlined my immediate priorities: reversing client attrition, implementing 3 of my previously rejected projects, and rebuilding team morale. You have until tomorrow morning to decide your future with Palmer, I concluded. Choose wisely. As they filed out, Lena caught my eye from the doorway where she'd been watching. Her slight smile was the first genuine support I'd seen all day. That evening, as I prepared for my first full day as CEO, Kennedy appeared in my doorway. "They're planning something," she said without preamble. I looked up from my notes. "Explain." Declan called an off-site meeting with the others at Terrence's house. "They're coordinating their response." "I expected as much," I replied. "Why are you telling me?" Kennedy stepped fully into the office, closing the door behind her. "Because I've watched you fight for 3 years while they took credit for others' work and buried problems. I'm tired of it." "Yet you told Declan about my meeting with Eleanor." She flinched. "Yes, a decision I regret." I studied her, weighing sincerity against potential deception. "What exactly did you hear them planning?" "Mass resignations designed to cripple operations. They believe you'll fail without their institutional knowledge." I nodded slowly. "Thank you for the warning." After she left, I called Eleanor. "They're planning coordinated resignations." "As we anticipated," she replied calmly. "Are contingency plans in place?" "Yes, but there's something else we need to discuss." I hesitated. "I found irregularities in the financial records that go beyond poor management." Eleanor's voice sharpened. "What kind of irregularities?" "The kind that might interest federal regulators." The silence stretched between us. "How certain are you?" she finally asked. "Certain enough that I've secured the evidence." "Proceed carefully, May," she warned. "If what you're suggesting is true, they won't simply resign. They'll fight with everything they have." "I'm counting on it," I replied. The next morning, I arrived early to find Lena waiting outside my office. "You should see this," she said, handing me her tablet. On the screen was an email chain between Declan and the others, discussing ways to undermine my leadership. The final message from Declan read, "Meeting in my office at 8:30. United Front. She'll be gone within a week." "How did you get this?" I asked. Lena's expression was grim. "They included me, thinking I'd side with them. They're gathering in Declan's office right now." I checked my watch. 8:27 a.m. "Perfect timing," I murmured. As I approached Declan's office, their voices carried through the partially open door. "We present our resignations simultaneously," Terrence was saying. "The board will have no choice but to reconsider when they realize she can't run operations without us." "What about legal implications?" Phoebe asked. "There's nothing illegal about resigning," Griffin assured her. "Besides, we've been careful too." I pushed the door open. 9 heads swiveled toward me. "Please, don't let me interrupt," I said pleasantly. "You were discussing resignation strategies?" Declan recovered first. "This is a private meeting. In a company office, on company time, planning coordinated action against company interests?" I shook my head. "That's not how privacy works, Declan." "What do you want?" he demanded. I smiled slightly. "I came to save you the trouble of writing resignation letters." From my portfolio, I withdrew a stack of documents and placed them on his desk. "What are these?" Griffin asked, reaching for them. "Termination notices," I replied, effective immediately. The room erupted in protests. Papers flew as Terrence knocked the stack sideways. "You can't do this," Phoebe gasped, her composure cracking. "The board would never approve mass terminations of the entire executive team." "They already have," I replied calmly, retrieving the scattered documents. "Each termination includes specific performance failures and policy violations. The board reviewed them individually last night." Declan's face reddened. "This is absurd. We built this company into what it is today." "What it is today," I emphasized, "is a company losing market share, hemorrhaging talent, and concealing its decline from stakeholders." Griffin stepped forward, his tall frame looming over me. "You think you can walk in here after 3 days as CEO and destroy careers built over decades?" I held his gaze. "You did that yourselves. I'm merely making it official." Security appeared in the doorway, not the usual building guards, but external specialists hired for this specific purpose. "This is Eric and his team," I introduced. "They'll escort each of you to collect personal belongings before leaving the premises." Phoebe's laugh held a hysterical edge. "You think it's that simple? We built relationships with every major client. They're loyal to us, not Palmer's logo." "An interesting theory," I agreed. Let's test it. Call any client right now. Tell them you've been terminated for performance issues and want them to follow you elsewhere. Her confidence faltered. Security will now escort you to your offices. You have 30 minutes to collect personal items. Company devices stay here. As they were led away, Declan remained, watching me with calculated intensity. You won't last a month, he said quietly after the others left. You know operations, but nothing about executive leadership. Perhaps, I conceded. But unlike you, I recognize what I don't know, and I've already hired people who do. His eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Your replacement started yesterday, I informed him. External hires with proven track records, plus several internal promotions of people you consistently overlooked. The truth registered in his eyes. That's why the board moved so quickly. You already had replacements lined up. Eleanor and I have been planning this transition for months. I glanced at my watch. Your 30 minutes starts now. As security led him away, his parting words dripped with venom. This isn't over. He was right. By afternoon, reports came in of executives contacting clients, spreading rumors about company instability. Phoebe had attempted to download client databases before security disabled her access. Griffin had already called 3 industry reporters claiming hostile takeover by an unqualified usurper. I gathered my new leadership team, a mix of external hires and promoted staff who had suffered under the previous regime. They're fighting back exactly as predicted, I informed them. Activating client relationships, spreading misinformation, attempting data theft. Lena, now operations director, looked worried. Benning Industries called asking if we're having financial problems. Declan contacted their CEO directly. Contact each key client personally, I instructed. Share our growth strategy and the performance data they've never seen. Transparency is our advantage now. What about the press calls? Asked Jared, our new communications director. Schedule a media roundtable for tomorrow. We'll address everything directly. As they dispersed, Eleanor called. The board's receiving concerned calls, she reported. How are you handling it? Exactly as planned, I assured her. But there's something we need to discuss in person. That evening, I met Eleanor at her home office, a wood-paneled room filled with mementos from Palmer's early days. You mentioned financial irregularities, she said, dispensing with pleasantries. Show me. I opened my laptop and displayed a series of transactions I'd uncovered. These payments to consultant groups in the Cayman Islands, I explained. They align perfectly with lost contract bids to Westlake Technologies. Eleanor studied the screen, her expression hardening. You're suggesting bid rigging? I'm suggesting the executive team accepted payments to ensure certain contracts went to competitors. I scrolled to another spreadsheet. These shell companies received consulting fees from Palmer while paying personal accounts belonging to Declan, Griffin, and Terrence. Self-dealing, Eleanor murmured. Criminal activity, not just poor management. There's more, I continued. Phoebe approved marketing budgets to agencies that hired her brother's production company at inflated rates. The kickback scheme spans at least 3 years. Eleanor's face had gone pale. Why didn't auditors catch this? The audit partner plays golf with Declan every Sunday. She rose abruptly, pacing the room. The board must be informed immediately. Not yet, I cautioned. If we move too quickly, evidence might disappear. I need time to secure everything properly. How much time? 2 weeks, I replied. They'll be desperate by then, making mistakes. We need to let them believe they still have leverage. As predicted, the counterattack intensified. 3 major clients requested emergency meetings after receiving alarming calls from former executives. Industry blogs published speculation about turmoil at Palmer. My personal history was scrutinized, with anonymous sources questioning my qualifications. Through it all, I maintained a calm public face while working 18-hour days, meeting nervous clients, reassuring employees, and secretly gathering more evidence of the corruption that had rotted Palmer from within. On my 10th day as CEO, Kennedy rushed into my office. They've filed a lawsuit, she announced breathlessly. Wrongful termination. They're demanding reinstatement and damages. I accepted the legal documents with surprising calm. Right on schedule. You expected this? Kennedy looked confused. It's their only play left. I scanned the complaint. They're demanding an emergency hearing tomorrow morning. Our legal team says we need to prepare immediately. I smiled slightly. Tell them not to worry. I'll handle this personally. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I finalized what I'd been building since discovering those first financial discrepancies months ago: a comprehensive map of corruption, self-dealing, and corporate sabotage orchestrated by the very people now suing for wrongful termination. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters the next morning. I arrived early, dressed simply but impeccably, carrying a single expandable folder. Inside, I found all 9 former executives huddled with their attorneys. Declan's smirk when he saw me sent a familiar chill down my spine, the same one I'd felt after each project rejection. "Miss Tanaka," their lead attorney greeted me. "We have a few minutes before the judge arrives. Perhaps we could discuss settlement terms?" "I'm comfortable proceeding to the hearing," I replied. Declan stepped forward. "Don't be stupid, May. You fired an entire executive team simultaneously, without proper cause. No judge will uphold that action." "We'll see." When Judge Wilson entered, the proceedings began with the plaintiff's attorney outlining the case. Distinguished executives with combined experience of over 150 years, summarily terminated by a new CEO with no executive experience, clearly motivated by personal vendetta. When my turn came, I approached the bench with my folder. "Your Honor, rather than make opening remarks, I'd like to submit evidence that renders this case moot." The judge nodded, and I handed over the first document. "This is a federal investigation notice served to Palmer Innovations this morning," I explained. "The SEC and FBI are investigating securities fraud, wire fraud, and racketeering charges against the plaintiffs." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Declan half rose from his seat before his attorney yanked him back down. "The plaintiffs weren't terminated for performance issues, though those existed," I continued. "They were terminated for criminal activity discovered during leadership transition." I proceeded to submit evidence of each executive's participation in various schemes: bid rigging, kickbacks, embezzlement through fake consultancies, and market manipulation. "Your Honor, these terminations weren't just appropriate. They were legally required once this evidence came to light. The company would face liability had we retained executives engaged in criminal activity." The judge reviewed the documents with increasing alarm. "Additionally," I continued, "we've learned the plaintiffs attempted to destroy evidence after termination. Federal agents are executing search warrants at their residences as we speak." The courtroom erupted. Through the chaos, I caught Declan's eye. The hatred there had transformed into something else: fear. Judge Wilson banged his gavel repeatedly until order returned. "This hearing is adjourned," he announced. "Given the pending federal investigation, this civil matter is stayed until criminal proceedings are resolved." Outside, reporters swarmed as the former executives hurried to waiting cars, jackets pulled over their heads. "Miss Tanaka," a reporter called, "did you know about the criminal activity when you became CEO?" I faced the cameras calmly. Palmer Innovations has always stood for integrity and innovation. When those values were compromised, the board took decisive action. We're cooperating fully with authorities and focused on rebuilding our company's legacy. Back at the office, my new executive team waited anxiously. When I entered the conference room, they fell silent. "The lawsuit is effectively dead," I announced. "But we have challenging work ahead rebuilding what they damaged." "The clients?" Lena asked. "We retain them through transparency," I replied. "Share everything, the good and bad, and our plan to improve." Over the following weeks, Palmer transformed. Innovative projects previously shelved were fast-tracked. Talented employees who had been overlooked received recognition and advancement. Clients who had considered leaving renewed contracts after seeing our new direction. 3 months after becoming CEO, I received the final communication I'd been waiting for: formal indictments against all 9 former executives on multiple federal charges. The evidence I'd meticulously gathered over months had proven overwhelming. That evening, I stood alone in my office, watching the sunset paint the city skyline. Eleanor joined me, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "A celebration seems appropriate," she said, offering me one. "For the indictments?" "For the company's recovery." She gestured toward the quarterly report on my desk. First growth quarter in 3 years. Client retention up 18%. Employee satisfaction scores at record highs. I accepted the glass. "That's the real victory. My husband would be proud," Eleanor said quietly. "Not of the revenge, though I admit that was satisfying, but of how you've restored Palmer's soul." "It wasn't revenge," I corrected her gently. "It was justice." "Is there a difference?" I considered this. watching light play across the glass buildings. Revenge would have been simply firing them. Justice was exposing the truth. The truth that they now face prison terms while you run their company. Eleanor's eyes twinkled. I smiled at last. Well, perhaps there's a small element of poetic justice. We clinked glasses as my phone buzzed with an incoming message. A news alert showing Declan being led into federal court in handcuffs. 9 times they removed me from projects claiming I didn't fit their culture, I murmured. They never realized they were the ones who didn't fit the culture this company was built on. To culture, Eleanor toasted, and to finally having the right person define it. As I sipped my champagne, I felt not the burning satisfaction of revenge, but something more lasting, the quiet pride of restoration. 9 rejections had led to this moment, not because I'd plotted vengeance, but because I'd refused to abandon what was right. Have you ever stood your ground when everyone said you didn't belong? Have you witnessed corruption hiding behind words like culture and fit? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, subscribe for more narratives about perseverance and justice. Remember, sometimes the path to leadership isn't about fitting in, it's about having the courage to stand out. I stared at my computer screen, reading the same hollow phrases for the 5th time in 3 months. Each word burned into my retinas like acid dripping on exposed nerves. Thank you for your interest. Impressive qualifications. Selected another candidate whose experience better aligns with our current needs. 5 different departments. 5 identical rejections. The cursor blinked mockingly as I scrolled through my sent items folder, examining each application: marketing specialist, strategic planner, content development, project management, customer insights analyst. All positions I could perform blindfolded after 10 years in the industry, an advanced degree, and consistent praise from previous employers. My phone pinged with a calendar notification. Interview follow-up, Benson. The HR representative who'd smiled too widely during my last interview, whose eyes had traveled down my blouse when he thought I was reviewing the portfolio I'd brought. The same man who'd said, "You're exactly what we're looking for," before the panel of 5 men nodding in agreement. Lies. Something snapped inside me. I dialed the company's main number, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "Human resources, please. I'd like to schedule an in-person meeting with Benson." 3 hours later, I sat across from him in a small conference room. His surprise when I walked in had been almost comical. "Iris," he said, recovering quickly. "What can I help you with today?" I placed my laptop on the table and turned it toward him, displaying all 5 rejection emails side by side. "What's really happening here?" My voice was quiet but clear. "I'm not sure what you mean," he said, his eyes darting to my screen. 5 positions, 5 rejections, each with identical wording. I've scored at the top of every assessment. I have 10 years of relevant experience. I have an advanced degree. So please, explain to me what's really happening. Benson's smile tightened. Different hiring managers have different hiring managers all reaching the same conclusion about me? What are the odds of that, Benson? A woman passing by the glass-walled room slowed, watching our exchange with undisguised interest. "I'm afraid I can't discuss internal hiring decisions," he said, standing abruptly. "Perhaps this position simply isn't the right fit for you." "Which position, Benson?" I applied to 5 different ones. His face flushed. "I think we're done here." As he reached for the door, I asked, "How many women have you hired this year at the management level?" He froze, hand on the doorknob. Without turning around, he said, "That information is confidential. Is it because there aren't any?" The door closed behind him with a soft click that echoed in my chest like thunder. The woman who had been watching approached as I gathered my things. She slipped a business card across the table. "Zoe Parker, legal department," she whispered. "Call my personal number. Not here. Not now." I nodded, tucking the card into my pocket as she walked away. Outside, rain pelted the pavement, matching the storm brewing inside me. I had come seeking answers but left with only more questions and a mysterious card burning in my pocket. What was Zoe risking by reaching out? And what would I discover when I called her? The subway ride home was a blur of faces and noise, my mind replaying each interview, each interaction, searching for clues I might have missed. Had I been too qualified? Too confident? Too female? My phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. "Did you get what you needed?" Before I could respond, another message appeared. "They're watching. Be careful what you put in writing." If you're feeling that knot in your stomach right now, if you're sensing there's more to this story than meets the eye, you're right. Hit that like button and subscribe to join me on this journey of discovery and justice. Trust me, what happens next changed everything. Not just for me, but for hundreds of women whose voices had been silenced. My name is Iris Lynn. I'm 34, with a master's degree in business administration and a reputation for solving problems others can't see. I specialize in data analysis and organizational behavior, skills that made me invaluable to previous employers, but apparently threatening to this one. Growing up with a single mother who worked 3 jobs to put me through college taught me 2 things. Injustice is everywhere, and fighting it requires strategy, not just passion. That night, I called Zoe from a coffee shop 3 blocks from my apartment. "I've been watching you apply," she said without preamble. "You're the 6th woman with outstanding qualifications they've rejected this quarter. Why are you telling me this?" A pause. "Because I'm leaving. 3 weeks' notice. I can't fight it anymore." "Fight what exactly?" "The boys' club, the glass ceiling, whatever you want to call it." Her voice dropped. "They hired Thomas as senior counsel last month. He graduated 2 years after me, has half my case record, and they're paying him 30% more." I jotted notes as she continued. "The last woman to make director was Anya. She quit after they excluded her from meetings, assigned her impossible deadlines, then questioned her commitment when she couldn't meet them. Why doesn't anyone file complaints?" Zoe laughed bitterly. 3 women did last year, all pushed out within months. Coincidentally, of course. "Of course," I echoed. "Listen, there's more. Check their leadership page. 28 executives, 26 men, 2 women, both in HR and communications. Their annual report brags about diversity initiatives, but the numbers tell the truth." After hanging up, I researched deeper. The company's social media showcased smiling women at company events, but a closer examination revealed most were administrative staff or junior associates. I created a spreadsheet tracking job postings against new hire announcements, noting gender patterns. The data was unmistakable. Women were interviewed but rarely hired above middle management. 2 days later, I developed a 3-part strategy. First, I applied for a small contractor position through an agency, using only my initials instead of my first name. Second, I launched an anonymous industry blog analyzing market trends, showcasing my expertise while building credibility. Third, I began attending industry events where board members would be present. The contractor position interview was scheduled quickly. I arrived wearing a tailored pantsuit, hair pulled back severely. The interviewer blinked in surprise when I entered. "Lynn, we were expecting—" "Iris Lynn," I confirmed, extending my hand. "Shall we begin?" His discomfort was palpable as I methodically addressed each question with precision and authority. By the end, his expression had shifted from surprise to reluctant respect. "Your technical knowledge is impressive," he admitted. "Thank you. When can I expect your decision?" "Soon. Very soon." Meanwhile, my blog gained traction. I published detailed analyses of industry challenges and solutions, carefully avoiding any mention of specific companies, but demonstrating deep understanding of the field. At my first industry function, I approached Wilson, a board member known for his progressive views. "Your quarterly report indicates a 17% efficiency gap in your Eastern operations," I said after introducing myself. His eyebrows rose. "You've read our quarterly report?" "I read all public documents from major industry players. May I offer an observation?" By the end of our conversation, he was asking for my card. "We need fresh perspectives like yours." The following week, I attended a charity gala where several board members were present. I strategically positioned myself at their table during dinner, contributing thoughtful comments to their discussion about market challenges. Diana, the only female board member, studied me with interest. "You speak as if you've been inside our operations." "Just an analyst who pays attention," I replied. 6 weeks into my plan, disaster struck. The agency called to inform me the contractor position had been eliminated due to budget constraints. The same day, my blog received a cease and desist letter claiming I had used proprietary information, a baseless accusation meant to silence me. Then Wilson, who had been particularly supportive, stopped returning my messages. That evening, as rain lashed against my windows, doubts flooded my mind. Was I fighting a losing battle? Was I risking my professional reputation for nothing? My phone pinged with an anonymous message. "Keep going. You're making them nervous." The sender's identity remained unknown, but the message reignited my determination. If they were trying to stop me, I must be on the right track. I pivoted my approach. Fighting alone from the outside wasn't working. I needed allies. Through Zoe's connections, I reached out to 3 other women who had experienced similar rejections. Vera, a marketing strategist with 15 years of experience. Kaya, a financial analyst with 2 published papers on industry optimization. And Liv, a former employee who had left after being passed over for promotion 3 times. We met at my apartment, spreading our documents across my dining table. They interviewed me 4 times, Vera said. Each time, they hired a man with fewer qualifications. Kaya nodded. Same pattern. They love my ideas but never quite find me the right fit. Liv added. When I asked why I wasn't promoted, my manager said I lacked leadership presence, whatever that means. Together, we formulated a new strategy. Rather than trying to break in individually, we would apply pressure collectively. We began attending shareholder meetings, asking pointed questions about hiring statistics. Your annual report mentions commitment to diversity, yet management remains 93% male. Could you explain this discrepancy? We created presentation decks comparing the company's public diversity claims against actual numbers, sending them anonymously to board members and industry publications. The pressure was building, but would it be enough to crack the foundation of bias that had stood firm for decades? The company's first response came 3 weeks later, a carefully worded press release announcing a new Diversity and Inclusion Task Force. The announcement featured stock photos of smiling people from various backgrounds alongside empty promises of comprehensive review and commitment to improvement. They're playing defense, Liv said during our strategy meeting in my apartment. Rain tapped against the windows as we huddled around my kitchen table, the scent of coffee mingling with the tension in the air. This means we're getting to them. Kaya analyzed the financial reports spread before her. Their stock dipped 3% after our questions at the shareholder meeting. Small, but board members noticed these things. Not enough, Vera said, tapping her pen against her notepad. They'll form this task force, assign some junior people to it, issue a report in 6 months claiming improvement, and nothing will actually change. I studied our timeline on the whiteboard. We need to accelerate. The annual leadership conference is in 3 weeks. Every executive and board member will be there, along with potential investors and industry press, Liv added. Perfect, I said, my mind already forming a plan. We spent the next week preparing detailed, data-driven packets comparing the company's hiring patterns against industry standards. We included anonymous testimonials from current and former female employees, statistics on productivity and innovation in diverse versus homogeneous teams, and concrete recommendations for improvement. Remember, I cautioned as we finalized our materials, this isn't about attacking them. It's about showing them a better way forward, one that benefits everyone, including their bottom line. The night before the conference, doubts crept in as I laid awake staring at my ceiling. What if this backfired? What if they found ways to discredit us? What if this ended with all of us blacklisted in the industry? My phone buzzed with a text from Kaya. Nervous? Terrified, I replied honestly. Good. Means we're doing something important. The conference venue gleamed with polished marble and ambient lighting, people in expensive suits networking over mimosas and tiny quiches. We arrived separately, dressed professionally, name badges displaying our affiliations with various industry organizations rather than our own consultancy we'd hastily formed. Liv positioned herself near the registration desk, monitoring arrivals. CEO just walked in with the executive team, she murmured into her earpiece. Board members at the northwest entrance. Vera approached the event coordinator, pressing our revised proposal into her hands. The CEO requested this be added to the presentation materials for the innovation panel. The coordinator looked confused. This wasn't on the schedule. Last-minute addition, Vera said confidently. He was quite insistent. Meanwhile, I navigated toward Diana, the female board member who had shown interest in my analysis at the gala. Miss Lin, she said, recognition lighting her eyes. I didn't expect to see you here. I wouldn't miss it, I replied, especially given the company's recent announcement about diversity initiatives. Something flickered across her face. Doubt? Guilt? Yes, we're making progress in that area. Are you? I asked softly, holding her gaze. The numbers suggest otherwise. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then back at me with narrowed eyes. Excuse me. Through my earpiece, Kaya whispered, they found the packets. Executive team huddling near the east hallway. Our materials had been strategically placed throughout the venue, on reserved seats for board members, at the press table, and in the investor lounge. Each contained irrefutable data about the company's hiring practices, pay disparities, and toxic culture. The CEO's face had turned an alarming shade of red as he flipped through the pages, surrounded by nervous-looking executives. He scanned the room, perhaps searching for whoever had distributed the information. I felt a hand on my elbow. Turning, I found Benson from HR, his expression a mask of forced pleasantry. "Miss Lynn, what a surprise. I wasn't aware you were attending today." "Professional development," I said with a smile that matched his insincerity, always looking to stay current. "Indeed." His grip tightened slightly. "Perhaps we could chat privately? I believe there may have been a misunderstanding regarding your applications." A flutter of hope. Was this working already? I quashed it immediately, recognizing the tactic: isolation. Any discussions about my applications should happen formally, with witnesses, I replied loud enough for nearby attendees to glance our way. "Unless, of course, there's something you wouldn't want others to hear?" I replied. His smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened. "I'm simply trying to clear up a potential misunderstanding." 5 identical rejections doesn't sound like a misunderstanding to me, Benson. It sounds like a pattern. People were watching now, curiosity piqued. "This isn't the appropriate venue," he began. "When is the appropriate venue? After how many qualified women are rejected? After how many complaints are buried? After how many careers are damaged?" The CEO approached, his face composed but eyes blazing. "Is there a problem here?" "No problem," I said calmly. "Just discussing your company's hiring practices. Have you had a chance to review the materials we prepared? The data is quite compelling." His jaw tightened. "I don't know what game you're playing." "It's not a game," I interrupted. "It's people's lives and careers, and it's your company's reputation and potential." Diana joined our growing circle, along with 2 other board members. "What materials are you referring to?" she asked. I nodded toward the packet in the CEO's hand. "The comprehensive analysis of how this company systematically excludes women from leadership positions while publicly claiming to value diversity." A journalist hovered nearby, pretending not to listen while typing rapidly on her phone. The CEO's smile was glacial. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion privately." "I think that's an excellent idea," said Diana, surprising everyone. "In fact, I'd like to convene an emergency board meeting. Now." The next 2 hours passed in a blur. The board commandeered a conference room, calling in members who weren't physically present. Vera, Kaya, Liv, and I presented our findings methodically, answering questions with data rather than accusations. Some board members were defensive, others shocked, a few seemingly unsurprised. The CEO alternated between dismissive and threatening, while Benson sat stone-faced, occasionally whispering to the company's legal counsel. "This is preposterous," the CEO finally exploded. "These women are disgruntled applicants trying to damage our reputation because they weren't hired." Diana leaned forward. "The question isn't whether we're being attacked, Gregory. The question is whether the accusations have merit." "Our hiring practices are completely fair," Benson insisted. "Then you won't mind an independent audit," I suggested. "Absolutely not," the CEO snapped. "We're not subjecting ourselves to some witch hunt based on cherry-picked data." "Afraid of what they'll find?" Liv asked quietly. The tension in the room was suffocating when Diana spoke again. "I move that we engage an independent firm to review our hiring practices and corporate culture." "Seconded," said Wilson, surprising me after his earlier silence. "This is completely unnecessary," the CEO protested. "Our internal processes have clearly failed," Diana interrupted. "The vote is 7-2 in favor. The audit proceeds." Outside the conference room, Vera squeezed my hand. "First victory," she whispered. But our celebration was premature. The following week, the company announced they had selected an audit firm, one known for its close relationships with major corporations and management-friendly findings. "They're rigging the game," Kaya said when we met to strategize. That evening, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. Through the peephole, I saw Diana standing alone in the hallway. I opened the door cautiously. "This is unexpected. May I come in?" she asked, glancing down the corridor. Inside, she declined my offer of tea, pacing my small living room instead. "They're preparing to bury this," she said without preamble. "The audit will find areas for improvement, but no systemic issues. The CEO is already drafting a response claiming vindication." My heart sank. "You seem well informed. I've been on this board 5 years. Do you know how I got there? I was the token woman they needed for optics after a similar complaint years ago." Her eyes met mine. "I told myself I could change things from the inside. Instead, I've watched dozens of qualified women get passed over while nodding along with the excuses. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm tired of being complicit. She handed me a flash drive. Internal communications about hiring decisions for the past 3 years. Performance reviews, salary data, everything you need. I stared at the small device. This could cost you your position. It already has. I submitted my resignation this morning. She moved toward the door. What you do with that information is up to you. But whatever it is, I suggest you do it quickly. They're mobilizing against you. The implications hit me as soon as she left. She had just handed me evidence of potentially illegal hiring practices and painted a target on my back. I called an emergency meeting with my allies, explaining the situation. We have 2 choices, I said. We can take this to the press, blow the whistle publicly. Or what? Vera asked, eyes fixed on the flash drive sitting on my coffee table like a live grenade. We could try something unexpected, I said slowly, an idea forming, something they would never anticipate. What exactly did you have in mind? Liv leaned forward, intrigued. What if, instead of attacking them, we offered to help them? I suggested. Kaya frowned. Help the people who rejected all of us? Not help them cover this up, I clarified. Help them actually fix the problem. Why would we do that? Vera asked. And why would they let us? I smiled, the pieces of a new plan falling into place. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't destruction, it's transformation. On our terms. Little did I know then how our quest for justice would evolve, or the formidable obstacles still ahead. The company's resistance would prove more entrenched than we imagined, and the personal cost higher than any of us expected. But in that moment, looking at these 3 brilliant women who had joined me in this fight, I felt something I hadn't experienced since opening that 5th rejection letter: hope. What none of us realized was that someone inside the company was already working to undermine us. Someone with far more to lose than just their reputation. And they wouldn't stop at merely discrediting us. The next morning, I woke to breaking news that would change everything. The notification on my phone jolted me awake at 5:17 a.m. Squinting at the screen, I saw a news alert. Industry leader announces restructuring amid allegations of discriminatory practices. Fully alert now, I opened the article to find the company's official statement. In response to concerns raised about our hiring practices, we are undertaking a comprehensive restructuring of our talent acquisition processes. We have also become aware of potentially fraudulent activities by external parties attempting to manipulate our hiring decisions for personal gain. We take these matters seriously and are investigating fully. My phone immediately erupted with texts from Vera, Kaya, and Liv. All had seen the statement. All recognized the implied threat. They're painting us as criminals, Vera wrote. Classic deflection, responded Kaya. Liv's message was more alarming. My apartment was broken into last night, laptop missing, nothing else taken. A chill ran through me as I scanned my own apartment. Everything appeared untouched, but I suddenly felt exposed. I checked the flash drive Diana had given me, still safely hidden inside a hollowed-out book on my shelf. By 7 a.m., we had convened at a small cafe 3 neighborhoods away from any of our homes. This changes everything, Liv said, dark circles under her eyes. They're not just defending themselves anymore. They're attacking. And they have resources we don't, added Vera. Legal teams, security, connections. Kaya drummed her fingers on the table. The fraudulent activities claim is concerning. They could be building a case against us. Or it could be a bluff, I suggested, though without much conviction. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check your email. Urgent. The message in my inbox was brief. They're searching for the flash drive. Diana is being questioned. Lawyer up. Zoe. Still working on the inside. We need to accelerate, I said, showing them the message. They're trying to control the narrative before we can act. But what exactly is our play now? Vera asked. Go public with what we have? That just confirms their claims that we're attacking them. I considered our options. No, we stick with the plan, but we modify it. Instead of offering to help them quietly, we make a public proposal they can't refuse without looking worse. Over the next 4 hours, we crafted a detailed proposal for what we called the Industry Equity Initiative, a comprehensive program to address bias in hiring practices, not just at this company, but across the industry. We positioned ourselves as consultants with specialized expertise in organizational behavior and inclusive talent development. Rather than accusing the company directly, we presented data on industry-wide patterns, using their statistics as just one example among many. We emphasized the business benefits of diverse leadership teams, innovation, adaptability, profitability, with research citations backing every claim. Most critically, we created a press release announcing our initiative, naming several companies we were in discussions with, including our target. This puts them in a bind, I explained. Deny our involvement, and they look resistant to improvement. Accept it, and they have to actually work with us. Clever, Kaya nodded, but risky. What if they sue us for defamation? The release doesn't make accusations, I pointed out. It simply states we're discussing potential collaboration, and everything else is factual data available in public records. We were preparing to send out our materials when Liv's phone rang. Her face paled as she answered. "It's my former manager," she whispered, covering the microphone. "He says the company wants to meet." The timing couldn't be coincidental. How did they know what we were planning? After a brief conversation, Liv hung up. "They want all four of us to come in tomorrow morning. The CEO will be there." "It's a trap," Vera said immediately. "Maybe," I conceded. "But it's also an opportunity. They're worried enough to invite us in. Or they want to threaten us face to face," Kaya countered. We debated for an hour before reaching a decision. We would attend, but on our terms. We'd meet in a neutral location, not their offices. We'd bring our own recording devices. And most importantly, we'd send our press release to key industry publications with an embargo. If we didn't confirm by a specific time tomorrow, the story would go live. That night, I barely slept. Around 3 a.m., I heard a noise outside my apartment door. Footsteps paused, then continued past. Paranoia or actual surveillance? Impossible to know. The meeting was set for 9 a.m. at a downtown hotel conference room. We arrived early, swept the room for listening devices, finding none, and positioned ourselves strategically, backs to walls, facing the door, recording apps activated on phones placed casually on the table. At precisely 9 a.m., the door opened. The CEO entered first, followed by Benson from HR, two people I assumed were legal counsel, and surprisingly, Diana. "Thank you for coming," the CEO began with practiced cordiality. "We wanted to address some concerning activities directly." "Such as?" I asked, matching his professional tone. "Let's not play games, Miss Lin," Benson cut in. "We know you've been coordinating efforts to damage this company's reputation." "Actually," Vera interjected, "we've been researching industry-wide hiring patterns and their impact on business performance. Your company is just one data point in our analysis." The CEO's smile tightened. "And this analysis conveniently began after you were all rejected for positions?" "Research often starts with personal experience," Kaya replied calmly. "That doesn't invalidate the findings." Diana hadn't spoken yet, but I noticed her watching me intently. She gave an almost imperceptible nod toward one of the lawyers, the younger woman whose hands were clasped too tightly on the table. "We understand you may have concerns," this lawyer said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "But attempting to pressure a company through threats and stolen data isn't the appropriate channel." "What's stolen data?" I asked innocently. The CEO leaned forward. "We know about the flash drive, Miss Lin. So that was their play. Trap us into admitting we had confidential information." "I'm not sure what you're referring to," I said. "All our research uses publicly available information." Frustration flickered across his face. "Let's be direct. We're prepared to offer all of you settlements in exchange for confidentiality agreements and the return of all company data in your possession." There it was, the bribe. "How generous," Liv said coldly. "And what exactly would we be keeping confidential? Your systematic exclusion of qualified women from leadership positions? These are unsubstantiated allegations," Benson began. "Actually," I interrupted, "they're thoroughly substantiated and documented and ready for publication, unless we can reach a more constructive agreement." "Blackmail?" the second lawyer asked. "Negotiation," I corrected. "We're not interested in settlements or confidentiality agreements. We're interested in actual change." I slid copies of our Industry Equity Initiative proposal across the table. "This is our counteroffer. We establish an independent advisory board to review and improve hiring practices, not just at your company, but industry-wide. You become the first corporate partner, demonstrating leadership in addressing a problem that affects the entire sector." The CEO glanced at the proposal, then pushed it away. "This is absurd. You want us to hire you after this stunt?" "Not hire us," Kaya clarified. "Partner with us. There's a difference." "And if we refuse?" asked the second lawyer. I checked my watch. Our press release goes live in 20 minutes. Your choice, whether it positions you as part of the problem or part of the solution. The tension in the room was palpable as the CEO conferred in whispers with his team. Diana remained silent, her expression unreadable. Finally, the CEO turned back to us. We need more time to review this proposal. The press embargo expires in 18 minutes now, I reminded him. This is coercion, Benson hissed. This is consequences, I replied evenly. The younger lawyer whispered something to the CEO, who looked increasingly cornered. Fine, he snapped finally. We'll participate in your initiative as founding partners, but we have conditions. So do we, I responded. What followed was 15 minutes of intense negotiation, resulting in a framework agreement that would establish the Industry Equity Initiative with independent oversight, transparent reporting, and accountability measures. As we all stood to leave, Diana finally spoke. I'll be serving as board liaison to this initiative, she announced, surprising even the CEO, given my resignation was never formally accepted. Outside the hotel, we maintained our composure until turning the corner, then broke into breathless laughter and tears. Did that just happen? Liv asked incredulously. It happened, I confirmed, still processing the magnitude of what we'd accomplished. But will they actually follow through? Vera wondered. They'll have to, Kaya said. We've got the agreement in writing, witnesses, and recordings. Plus, I added, checking my phone, I just confirmed with our media contacts. The release is live, but with the updated information about the partnership. 3 months later, I stood at a podium addressing the company's quarterly all-hands meeting, not as an outside consultant, but as the newly appointed Executive Director of Organizational Development. The journey to this moment had been neither simple nor straightforward. The initial agreement had nearly collapsed twice. Anonymous threats had been sent to all 4 of us. Industry competitors had tried to undermine the initiative, but we had persevered, backed by data, determination, and growing public support. Today marks a new chapter, I began, surveying the sea of faces before me. 3 months ago, I stood outside these doors, repeatedly rejected despite my qualifications. Today, I stand here to ensure that talent, not gender, determines opportunity. My gaze found Benson in the crowd, now demoted to associate HR manager. Beside him sat the hiring managers who had rejected me 5 times. They avoided my eyes. This initiative isn't about retribution, I continued. It's about transformation, about building a company that truly embodies the values it claims to uphold. In the front row sat Vera, now heading the new talent acquisition team. Kaya had been appointed to lead data analytics for the initiative. Liv was developing training programs for management. The audit results released today confirm what some have long suspected. Systemic barriers existed that prevented qualified women from advancing. Those barriers are now being dismantled. Diana, who had emerged as our strongest ally on the board, nodded approvingly. The revenge some expected me to seek isn't in punishment or public humiliation, I said, lowering my voice slightly. It's in the 73% increase in female applicants for leadership positions. It's in the new mentorship program connecting senior women with emerging talent. It's in the pay equity adjustments implemented last month. I paused, letting my words sink in. And it's in the face of every woman in this room who now sees a path forward that wasn't visible before. The CEO shifted uncomfortably in his seat as I continued. Change isn't easy. Some resist it, some resent it, but the data is undeniable. Diverse teams perform better. Inclusive companies innovate faster. Equitable workplaces attract top talent. I gestured toward the screen behind me, where our latest metrics were displayed. Since implementing these changes, employee satisfaction has increased 12%. Productivity is up, turnover is down. By every measurable standard, this company is stronger today than it was 3 months ago. Looking directly at the men who had rejected me, I delivered the final blow, not with anger, but with calm certainty. The greatest revenge against a broken system isn't breaking it further. It's rebuilding it better. It's standing in the position you were told you couldn't have, not to gloat, but to hold the door open for others. The applause began tentatively, then swelled, first from the women in the audience, then spreading until even some of those who had resisted our efforts joined in. As I gathered my notes, the CEO approached the podium. "Thank you, Iris," he said, the words clearly costing him. "Your perspective has been valuable." I smiled, knowing his acknowledgement came not from a change of heart but from the undeniable results on the quarterly reports. Results speak for themselves. I replied quietly, and we're just getting started. Walking back to my office, the same corner office once occupied by men who had rejected me, I felt not the bitter satisfaction I had once craved, but something more profound. The system that had tried to exclude me was now under my influence, changing from within. If you've ever faced rejection that felt unfair, if you've ever suspected the playing field wasn't level, I hope this story inspires you to look deeper, gather your evidence, and find constructive ways to create change. The greatest victories don't come from tearing others down, but from building something better in place of what was broken. Like, comment, and subscribe for more stories about transforming obstacles into opportunities. Because sometimes, the most powerful response to no is not anger, but innovation.